Good afternoon, everyone. Really excited to be here. Excited for this talk. What we're going to talk about today is going from billions to trillions, campaign financing for the Sustainable Development Goals. So to reach those goals by 2030 takes a lot of money, and we're going to talk a lot about how to get that money, how brands are involved, and different types of activations. So I'm joined by Amy Agnew, from the VP of International at Global Citizen, and I'm joined also by Natasha, who is the Chief Executive of The World We Want, and Sterling Media. So I'm going to have them talk a little bit about their organizations and what they do to kick it off, and then we'll get into the conversation.
Okay. Shall I go first?
Yes, please.
So Global Citizen's an international campaigning organisation, and we are basically movement builders. We're trying to build the world's biggest movement of people who are all actively engaged in trying to bring about a world without extreme poverty by the year 2030. And we have this very unique model. We've got content, we have a whole content platform, but all of that content, every article you read, every video you watch, links to something you can do, a campaign action you can take, like a petition you could sign, or email your MP, tweet your Prime Minister, and then you get points for taking those actions, and then you're able to cash in those points for free tickets to events, mainly music events, pop concerts, gigs, but also we put on some really special, amazing Global Citizen festivals where you can't buy a ticket to come along, you need to earn your ticket by taking action. And we have this pop and policy mix up on our stages.
So you're really going from not awareness campaigns, but awareness into actually taking action.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We're trying to drive people up the ladder of engagement.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Natasha?
So The World We Want was set up with the mission to kind of unlock the potential of ideas, people, tech, networks to accelerate progress to achieving the SDGs. So we run a number of different campaigns for different organisations aligned to different SDGs, so whether it's the World Food Programme, whether it's UN Women, whether it's about menstrual hygiene awareness as well, increasing awareness around women's reproductive sexual rights with the UNFPA. And so several different projects globally. We also have our own summit coming up with our partners Times of India Group in India, launching this November, and the ambition there is to have something in the global south, starting off in India, which India can actually kind of spotlight its work in accelerating progress towards the SDGs.
Awesome. And I forgot to introduce myself. I'm Jason Harris, CEO of Mekanism. We're an independent creative agency, and we actually have been involved. We did a campaign for the SDGs called One for All that we launched a couple years ago. And it's interesting to hear you guys talk about not just doing campaigns, but actually creating change, because I think that's sort of the barometer when you're talking about achieving these 17 goals by 2030. It really takes everyone in the world to do sort of one action to get involved, or we're really not going to move the needle. I think just doing awareness isn't enough, obviously. Okay, cool. So I did want to ask you guys a question. Of the 17 goals, is there one that is most important to you?
I think passionately quality education, so because that kind of interrelates with every single other goal. So if you achieve goal 4, you can achieve the rest of the goals. But I really feel one of the goals that really needs its due is goal 17, partnerships.
Yeah.
Because we're a big believer, even at, in our organisation, that you need multi-sector stakeholders collaborating for social good. There's not one single institution in this world that's going to solve the world's problems. We all need to work together, so whether it's media, talent, government, corporates, NGOs, civil society, every sector needs to come together to create that impact. So goal number 17.
Number 17, okay.
And for me, I mean, no poverty, number 1, is my bread and butter, and that's what I'm working for every day.
Right.
But I do think with gender equality, if we got that goal sorted, a lot of the others would fall into place.
I agree. I think it's interesting what you said, Natasha, how everyone has to do their part, and it's interesting that the 17, individual goals, they're all interlinked. You know, they're not individual goals, they're accomplished all together.
Absolutely.
Which I think is interesting. All right, so we're talking about campaign financing, and how do we actually get all the trillions of dollars we need. So there's a 1.4 trillion, it's hard to wrap your head around, shortfall every year in order to reach the 2030 goals. So that means whatever money is planned and being raised, additionally, every year we need 1.4 trillion more to reach the goals.
Yeah.
It's a big number.
It is.
Yeah.
And we, at Global Citizen, I'm really proud of the record that we've got. So in the last, since we've been going basically, 7 or 8 years, we've managed to unlock around 40 billion of new money, and most of that, around 75% of that, has been increases in aid that we've managed to unlock from governments, or better allocation of that aid.
Yeah.
But aid money, which is really, really important, and actually the best money to reach the hardest to reach people in the furthest away places, and has a really unique role in this whole bigger picture, will only ever be about a fifth or not even a sixth of that 1.4 trillion figure. And so when we thought about this, we realised that it just didn't add up, and that if we were going to campaign to reach all 17 of these goals, and particularly to end extreme poverty, we needed to think differently about the way that we were campaigning, including because if you think of the middle income countries where poverty is on the rise, so Nigeria and India as well, it's not so, the money's there, and aid is only a tiny, tiny proportion of those budgets. So we are trying to create citizen-led movements to unlock money from domestic governments to put into the goals, to get businesses to invest in these markets, and really just to convince CEOs that there is a huge benefit to unlocking hundreds of millions of new consumers. And actually, so it's brands. It's all about brands. I think it's a huge thing. And if you think about some of them, so if you take the top 5 tech companies, they're economies in themselves, and combined, their cash revenue, their cash reserves, I think together of those top 5 tech companies are more than 170 countries in the world.
Yeah.
If you take their revenue combined, it's more than 175 or something countries in the world.
Wow.
And they've benefited a lot from investment from pension funds and sovereign wealth funds. And for us, we want to kind of unlock some of that money for this, rather than to support, business growth.
It's interesting because you think about countries thinking from an international perspective instead of a national perspective. And when you're talking to governments, how do you get them to understand that it's one world and it's all connected together? That's probably a tough conversation to have.
Yeah, I mean, I think for brands that, I can't believe we still have to do it, because the evidence is there. There's a really good business case to make, and we'll talk more a bit later about the partnership we have with P&G, but they've done really well at just continually trying to show the business case for this.
And Natasha, I know, can you talk a little bit about, you're having a summit in India, I believe? I know India represents about 1/3 of the world's population, so that's obviously a massive, massive market. Can you talk a little bit about the summit you're doing?
Absolutely. So as you said, India has 1/3 of the world's population. So look at it positively or negatively. The world's going to achieve its SDGs targets. India needs to achieve its targets as well. So the summit, the ambition with the summit is to create kind of a Davos, a Cannes Lion type platform, but hosted by the Global South. I don't really feel that there's something in the Global South where the solutions, the activations, the innovations, all of those discussions are happening and being taken note, and people taking notice of it across the world. A lot of that decision making seems to happen in the West. So we want to organise a summit. There's ambitions to change the host country every year, but to keep it in the Global South, where the Global South, countries in the Global South, so whether it's countries in Africa, in India, Latin America, etc., they can actually have a leadership position. And I think it's my ambition. I would love to be part of India's success story, where India, in 10 years' time, actually can look back and say we were the benchmark country in achieving the SDGs. So that's the ambition with the summit. It's more of a high velocity event to kick off a broader 10-year strategy that we have in place to see how we can actually unlock this multi-sector collaborative approach that we talked about, bringing media, celebrities, the biggest Bollywood stars, the biggest Hollywood stars, civil society, citizens, etc., to accelerate progress and to amplify the good work that India is doing as well. But then also, spotlight the areas that we need to kind of push forward as well.
Yeah. Okay, so we've covered sort of what you guys do, your organizations. We covered the shortfall of going from billions to trillions every year. We have 11 years to sort of hit 2030 and achieve these really, really challenging goals. How do you guys envision the way to tackle that? I mean, you talked a little about individual things you're doing. Is it a lot of organizations coming together, or is it sort of separate, everyone kind of doing their own thing? How do you envision that? And also, how do you interface with the UN as part of that solution?
I think institutions like the UN, or whether it's the Commonwealth or governments, the heads of states, I think they're important because I think that's where the policy and the major sort of discussions are taken forward. But I'm a big believer that you can't fight for your rights if you don't know what your rights are.
Right.
So the discussions, I think this is where the big issues were with the MDGs as well.
Yeah.
All of the decision making, all of the noise was happening in the top level, but how do you make this chatter like household chatter? How do you decentralize the goals as well? How do you bring the goals to the attention of every single human being on this planet?
Right.
And that takes effort across the board, again, just talking about, various different institutions, different sectors coming on board for that common good. You need to have this sort of shared common sense of purpose as well, and I think that's where global citizen comes in, as I'm a global citizen, and I have a shared value with my brother and my sister from Latin America or Africa, America, whatever. It's one planet, right? So we don't even have a plan B to go to. So we're all in it for the end game, and everybody has their part to play, whether it's one person, 100 person. There's 100 people can inspire 1 million people, and 1 million, 1 billion. So it's a collective effort.
It's really interesting because I hear that a lot, that the prior goals suffered from not activating the billions of people on planet Earth, and really just it was sort of the higher ups in closed door sessions that were figuring out how to tackle that and the finances. And it seems that both marketing, advertising, communication, social has really changed so that it's really democratized everything to bring it down to the individual citizen. So maybe you could talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, and technology as well has really helped with that. I mean, so that I completely agree with what you said, Natasha, and that's completely embedded in our model. I was saying we have this POP and policy model. And so we just did this huge event in South Africa at the end of last year, 100,000 people in this enormous stadium, and you couldn't buy your ticket, you had to earn your ticket by taking part in these campaign actions. We had Beyonce, Jay-Z, Ed Sheeran, Chris Martin, completely incredible lineup, as well as some of the best African talent from the continent. And then we had 15 heads of state come and respond on stage to the campaigns that we've been running. So Erna Solberg, who's Prime Minister of Norway, for example, stood up and said, okay, I got your hundreds of thousands of tweets or messages, and I'm here to announce that Norway is going to invest more in, I think it was girls' education. We'd run these long campaigns, and it was incredible because you feed back to citizens who don't necessarily feel particularly empowered or inspired by politics or any of that kind of thing. And by hearing that tweet has had an impact on a girl, and we're really good storytellers, so we'll take it from the tweet to the leader, to the commitment, and we follow that through, and then we show the impact on that girl in Kenya or wherever who will be educated as a result of your action. And that feels empowering and great, and like we can actually make this stuff happen. Yeah,
it makes you feel optimistic because prior it was sort of top down, and now it's really the citizens sort of telling the people of power where to put the money.
Absolutely. I was just going to say, I think with Global Citizen, I'm not planning to Global Citizen not here, but it's truly that's a brilliant organisation. I think empathy is really key. I think once you understand somebody else's issues and problems, I mean, where I'm very privileged. From where I've come from, what I've achieved, I'm very privileged. But there's so many millions of other girls around this world who don't have the possibilities that we have. They don't even know they exist. And that's the sad thing. If only they knew what their potential could be, imagine what they could be doing. We could be creating the next Bill Gates of the world, or the next Malala, or whatever it could be,
So obviously, there's the private sector, there's governments, and then a big area of financing is brands. And the good thing about the timing of all of this is that brands more than ever have to show their consumers that they care and that they have purpose and that they stand for something. So maybe talk a little bit about some brand examples. I know you did something with the Times in India, is that right?
We're doing something with Times.
You're doing something, do you want to talk about that?
For the summit, it's a huge media, it's India's biggest media conglomerate, putting all of their media might, their networks, their connections, their reach to push the goals and raise awareness of the goals as well. But I think the trick with what we're trying to, what we're very committed to doing with the summit or the 10-year strategy is how we're going to create that awareness into a real form of action. So it's not just going to be a massive stage of all of these guys coming on board and showing their brilliance, but holding them accountable, but actually what happens after the event, what's the legacy as well.
That's awesome.
So when you have media organizations, I think whether they're media, whatever sector they're in, they're an organization, they have a footprint. They have customers, they have employees. You have, like, for example, Tata, which is one of the world's biggest employers of like maybe 1 million employees worldwide. Imagine what those employees could be doing as well as ambassadors, or if they were evangelizing the goals as well.
Right.
And think about the customer base as well.
Yeah.
So there's so many different ways that brands and businesses and organizations can get behind the goals. And we're not just talking tangibly, i.e. financially. It's not just about, hey, you need to give us the money to do it. You could be doing it yourself in more intangible ways, like employee engagement programs, in mentoring as well. It's a really, really big thing that organizations should be up.
Right, and you guys did something with P&G and
so
National Geographic?
So I've got a couple of examples from P&G, and it shows the development to where we got to with National Geographic, maybe by just describing one of the first elements that we did with them. Because I found them quite brave and interesting in that they've completely embedded women's economic empowerment into their business model. So they're not just kind of slapping a bit of sponsorship onto us or anybody else. They've changed, they've adapted their supply chain because there's this horrendous statistic of the trillions of dollars spent by multinational corporations on supplies, on buying. 1% is spent on women-owned businesses. 99% goes to male-owned businesses. And we all became aware of this, and they agreed to spend 100 million on purely women-owned businesses in developing countries, which was quite a upfront investment for them. And what they've been amazing about is showing how once they'd gone through, they spent it in a year, and they really showed how it made business sense. Ultimately, it came back to them.
Right.
And there's just no question about that. And obviously it had the most amazing impact on, it was actually in India, a lot of it, and has had the most amazing impact on some of the women's lives, because women, we know, invest a lot more back into their families, back into their communities. There's this great study, a case study on our site, that we talk about this woman from India who's got her whole community now working in this tea production place that she's now, selling to P&G. So not only did they do that by adapting their supply chain, but they also worked with us to get 9 other companies on board. So we had this brilliant moment on one of our stages in New York with 10 companies like Ernst & Young, J&J, Walmart, massive companies who all committed to spend 100 million on buying from women. And so P&G have seen the advocacy is bigger than them, basically. Yeah. So that's been exciting.
It's good they're taking a leadership position.
Exactly.
It's really, really impressive.
And it's a great story for their customer base and staff.
And when you guys go to brands, to work with brands, how do you approach sort of telling their story and weaving it into achieving the goals? Because obviously they want to do good, but they need their business to be propped up also. Yeah. Is there any techniques or any approach that you guys have when you go to partner with brands that you've seen that are effective?
I think that for me, the biggest statement to make to them is you could be doing well by doing good.
Yeah.
You don't have to replace being purposeful with being profitable. You can be purposeful and profitable at the same time. Awesome. And I think data is really important. Mm-hmm. So when you look at even the hidden impact that women have in our workforce and economically as well. So there was a statistic that says that the gender gap of women not being in our workforce is costing us 15% of our GDP globally, and that's a huge sum.
Wow.
So if you can demonstrate the data, that these are the facts, these are the statistics, this is why you should be backing the goals. And I think from brands are businesses at the end of the day as well. Yeah. So you've got to present the business case. So this is the ROI that you'll be generating, which will impact you socially, emotionally, economically, financially as well. So demonstrate the business case. You've got to talk to them as if you're a business and on business terms as well, for them to understand why this is so important. And if you want to be very you know, there's a bigger, wider conversation there to have in terms of this is the impact that you're going to be making nationally or locally or globally. But if you just want to focus on yourself as a business and how much money you can make, you could be making a lot of money as an individual entity as well. Because if you're a sustainable business, balancing the whole sort of, you know, impact on people and planet and profits, you can see yourself as an individual entrepreneur, how much money you could be saving. When you think about your supply chain, like Amy was talking about the supply chain, when you talk about your capital, when you talk about the fact that your resource capital could be eroded because of climate change or whatever. So when you start understanding how much it can even affect you and your business and your bread and butter, you probably would take a bit more notice as well.
And from our perspective, another really tangible example, again with Procter & Gamble, because we're trying to create these citizen-led movements that are demanding change from brands, from governments, from everybody, individuals, wealthy individuals, we decided that broadcast was a really effective way of reaching millions and millions of people. So we came up with this concept with partner Radical Media, it's a series called Activate. It's coming out in September on the National Geographic Channel. 6-part series in 172 countries. It will be screened, 43 languages, and each episode links to one of these goals basically. And it does amazing storytelling. I watched a couple of the rough cuts a couple of nights ago and just was in floods of tears. You know, it's incredibly moving and great TV basically. And what we hope is that this will, really get out to a lot of people. We did it in partnership with P&G, who got their brands, which are featured in each of the episodes. So quite a lot of media spend from these individual brands, like Tide, who have this water purification tablet, and Always the sanitary towels, and Head and Shoulders, you know, obviously shampoo. And so they put their media spend into this, and it's great storytelling, lots of experts, partners who are talking about the challenges and the progress that we've made. And I think we've seen a lot of these amazing nature and Blue Planet type documentaries that have completely changed the way we all behave. And what I hope is that this will broaden that a bit and join the planet and the people aspect of these goals. And
awesome. When is Activate launch?
So September. Yeah.
Okay. Everyone watch that. And then speaking.
I was just going to say one thing actually, just in continuation of what Amy was saying, is that with businesses and organisations and the private sector, I think you have like an individual who becomes your CSR head, which is important. But I think a company should remember that their commitment to society and achieving the SDGs isn't just a CSR objective. It needs to be part of your DNA of the business. It needs to be ingrained as part of your own personal value system as well. That cuts across, not because it's just a tick box. And I tick my CSR box, so to speak.
Switching gears for a second, I know this is all very heavy, right? What do you think about tone when you're working with a brand? Because I know you did something with the Spice Girls, which is a different tone than you might think of as the documentary series that Amy's working on. Can you talk a little bit about how that works in terms of tone and what your feeling is on it?
I think it just rests on the principle of popular culture for social good. So how can you use celebrities and their status and their persona not just to entertain but inspire action? Mm-hmm. So what we did is actually a brilliant idea by Richard Curtis, and back in 2016 or something, it was the 20th anniversary coming up with the Spice Girls song Wannabe, which just reminded everybody how old they were. I'm like, oh my god, maybe 20 years.
Yeah, I remember that
song. So he came up with a brilliant idea, him and his creative team, to let's do a remix of What I Really Really Want, but in line through the lens of the SDGs. So what do I really, really want for girls and women?
Right.
So it was a short 60-minute remix of the 60-second remix of the song, featuring talent from across the world. So big stars from Africa, big Bollywood actress. So it was, we were part of the whole, putting together of the film, right through to taking it out to Caroline, to taking it out to the world as well. So raising awareness, broke the internet in 2 days, 150 million views in a day, etc., etc. So really kind of leveraged the digital media to reach masses and millions.
Yeah, so it really has to be a mix of, however you can get the word out, right? Pop culture, summits, experiences, music,
Yeah.
There's a lot of ways to get out
And
there.
activate, I said I was in floods of tears, and I was, but it's also really uplifting because you see it links to the campaigns that we're doing, and you see the change, the really systemic change that will be brought about, like water systems being provided for people, millions of people, thanks to citizen action. So there's a happy side as well.
So you guys are real experts leading, waving the banner to achieve the goals by 2030. So we have 11 years. Do you guys think we can accomplish the goals in 11 years?
I think we have to. I think, I was saying earlier, I don't feel very happy about living in a world where people are living in extreme poverty, and some of these Activate series brought it home again about how dire the situation is. Seeing this young mother pouring this revolting contaminated water into her 6-month-old baby's mouth, it just doesn't sit well with me, obviously, and it doesn't sit well with any of us, and I think we have to do everything we can to build this into the way we live, the way we work, everything that we're doing. So yeah, I think we'll get there.
Think we'll get there?
I think we'll get there.
Natasha?
We have to.
Totally, I think so too. I think we've got 10 years, so fairly quite a bit of time, but I think everybody has to step in. Everybody has to do their bit. And use whatever medium, whatever vehicle, whatever opportunity, whatever distribution channel as possible in your access to bring the goals to life.
I love sort of the theme of this conversation, that what you guys are really talking about is going from sort of creating moments to really creating movements. Mm-hmm. So not just doing like one-off things, but really creating movements behind it where citizens are engaged and activated, and I think that's really how we have to be thinking about it moving forward. We're wrapping up, so I'm just going to have you guys look at the camera and say as succinctly as possible, if you're pitching a brand that's watching, how do you pitch them to get involved? How would you do that?
So, well, I would say as Global Citizen, we've become really good at talking to brands and helping them not just take their money and slap it on a sponsorship for various different things, but really, as Natasha was saying, how to embed the global goals into everything you do, both in a profitable and also sustainable way. And so we, as Global Citizen, would love to talk to all brands out there because we think every single brand has got a role to play in all of this, and we can help work that out.
I echo everything Amy said, but I'd also say, I think just to remember that, as I was saying earlier, you can be purposeful and you can be profitable at the same time, and you could be doing well by doing good. And I think the satisfaction that you as a company, as an entrepreneur, as an individual can feel when you realise that you've actually created impact and made a change, I think nothing can ever compare to that.